Ex-Russian spy Alexander Litvinenko was murdered for trying to expose the corruption at the heart of Vladimir Putin's mafia state, the public inquiry into his death has heard. His poisoning with polonium was an act of nuclear terrorism on streets of a major city, said Ben Emmerson QC, the barrister representing his family. Mr Litvinenko died in a London hospital in 2006 from radiation poisoning. Two Russians, Andrei Lugovoi and Dmitry Kovtun, have denied any involvement. Mr Litvinenko was 43 when he died from radioactive polonium-210 poisoning, 3 weeks after drinking tea laced with the substance at a meeting with the Russians at London's Millennium Hotel in November 2006. In his opening statement on the first day of the inquiry, Mr. Emmerson said Mr. Litvinenko was eliminated because he had made an enemy of the close-knit group of criminals who surrounded and still surround Vladimir Putin and keep his corrupt regime in power. It was an act of nuclear terrorism on the streets of a major city which put the lives of numerous other members of the public at risk, he said. The murder was an act of unspeakable barbarism that inflicted the most painful and lingering death imaginable, he added. Alexander Litvinenko had fled to the UK where he became a vocal critic of the Kremlin and worked for the UK intelligence service MI6. His widow Marina says he blamed the Kremlin as he lay dying in hospital, but Russia denies any involvement. No fair trial. Mr. Emmerson claimed there was not the slightest doubt that the murder was carried out by Dmitry Kovtun and former KGB bodyguard Andrei Lugovoi. The pair have been invited to give evidence via video link to the inquiry at the Royal Courts of Justice, led by Judge Sir Robert Owen. But Mr. Lugovoi told Russian television station Life News TV on Tuesday that there could be no fair trial in Britain. They classified the materials, saying Litvinenko cooperated with English intelligence. How can it be investigated impartially after that? He said. This is why we pulled out in protest. We want it to be investigated, but we want it to be impartial and, moreover, we want it investigated in Russia. The inquiry also heard that Mr. Litvinenko may have been poisoned with polonium not once but twice. He had recalled feeling unwell around the time of a meeting at a security company in mid-October and vomiting on one occasion about 2 or 3 weeks before being hospitalized, counsel to the inquiry Robin Tam QC said. Hair samples that are available indicate that Mr. Litvinenko may well have been poisoned twice and that the first occasion being much less severe than the second. Worldwide concern. BBC security correspondent Gordon Cora earlier said investigators had followed a radioactive trail across London. It suggested Mr. Litvinenko was poisoned not on the first attempt, but on the third, he said. The two men suspected of killing Alexander Litvinenko made 3 trips to London in the run-up to his death and brought polonium to try to kill him each time, the BBC understands. Sir Robert Owen said the death from radiation poisoning in London in 2006 had attracted worldwide interest and concern. He said sensitive evidence had established there was a prima facie case as to the culpability of the Russian state in Mr. Litvinenko's death. Sir Robert was originally appointed as the coroner at Mr. Litvinenko's inquest, but he called for a public inquiry because the inquest could not consider sensitive evidence due to national security fears. The UK government resisted the move at first but later changed its stance last July, amid worsening relations with Moscow over the crisis in Ukraine. Mr. Tam said many theories had been put forward about what happened to Mr. Litvinenko, including suggestions that he had committed suicide, or accidentally poisoned himself when handling the radioactive substance as part of a smuggling deal. He listed numerous issues which would have to be considered by the inquiry, such as Mr. Litvinenko's relationship with the late Russian businessman Boris Berezovsky and his links to journalist Anna Politkovskaya, a fierce critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin who was killed in 2006. The QC said evidence would be heard, both in the open and closed sessions, that Mr. Litvinenko had been working for MI6, a claim which the government refuses to confirm or deny. The inquiry heard Mr. Lugovoi had alleged UK intelligence services were involved in Mr. Litvinenko's death. It will also hear evidence that Mr. Litvinenko could have been assisting the Spanish security services with investigations into organized crime, as well as taking on private security work for Western businesses.